Archives of IT. archivesit.org.uk.
Tech people and their first computer encounter. The career direction of many people in tech was influenced by an early encounter with a computer. For many of our interviewees, it was unforgettable. Rory Cellan Jones is a writer and broadcaster on business and tech. Rory was not allowed to touch the computer at school and went on strike over one at the BBC. It was not until he had his own Apple Macintosh that he felt, wow.
At Dulwich, there was a science block. And I remember in that block, there was a computer which seemed to me, in my memory, this would have been 1974, 5, 6, seemed to fill a room. And the only way one saw it was on open days, because the only boys that were allowed to go near it normally were boys studying physics A-level, who had to approach it wearing white coats and feed it with ticker tape, as far as I understood. And the rest of you could stay well clear of this dangerous and exciting machine. But I always thought, even back then, that sounds quite exciting. And then when I came to London in 1983, that effectively was when I saw my first computer, which was, or worked with an actual computer. I may have seen some device in the Science Museum at some stage, but there's very hazy memories of that. But I got a job working as a producer overnight. Well, in the television newsroom. My first assignment, though, was to breakfast time. Breakfast television had just come on the air in Britain. 2 weeks before I arrived, I was sent down to Lime Grove, where they were starting breakfast television, and they were using a computer system, which I was trained on. And we were typing the scripts into this computer system, and then they came out in a sort of reel out of the top of the machine on sort of shiny paper, and were then rushed to the studio. And that was my first encounter with a computer, because in the main newsroom, what still happened was that producers, I was a producer then, wrote out their scripts, the sort of intros that were read out by the likes of John Humphreys. And they went and wrote them in longhand and dictated them to lady typists on the electric typewriters, who typed them out at furious speed. And a year or so later, there was an earthquake in the newsroom when the BBC announced it was going to bring in a computer system to the main television newsroom. And what happened? I and the rest of the newsroom went out on strike. We were not going to have these infernal machines. I remember one of the editors of output editors of one of the programs saying to somebody, if they bring them in here, I'm going to throw them out the window. Those damn machines. And I was a member of the union. We were called out on strike. We had to turn up at work, and the routine was the boss, the editor of the whole shebang, would say to you, are you prepared to work normally? Which meant working with the computers. And you said, no, sir. And you were then suspended. So that happened with me. So one of my earliest interactions with computers was to go out on strike over them. And then it was in 94, 95 that I acquired our first proper home computer, which was a Macintosh Performer 630 with a 250 megabyte hard disk. And the reason we went down the Apple route was that our next door neighbor was a nice woman who was a medical illustrator. And she told us that Macs were the only thing to get. Put us in touch with somebody who could advise us. People from the graphics sort of industry were obviously all or largely Mac based then. And despite the fact that it was incredibly expensive, this machine, but I'd been left £2,000 in a relative's will. And we spent the whole lot on 1,500 quid on the computer, something like 250 quid it feels like madness now, on a printer, and some more on a modem. And eventually, and this is from a person with absolutely zero background, worked out how to get it online. And the family, which was me, my wife, and our then 5-year-old son, gathered around the computer and watched in wonder as I found my way to the Louvre's website, which is one of the very early websites, and found that a picture would animate onto the screen line by line of an old master. And it felt like a miracle.
If you enjoyed this, find out more. Read and hear more stories from people of the industry at
Archives of IT, archivesit.org.uk.